You're listening to a GWP weather update. It's Sunday, January 25th, 2026, and I'm your host, Jacob Fulmer. And tonight we are going to be looking at the ongoing impacts from the winter storm that exited earlier this morning, as well as some snowfall totals. That's what we're going to be looking at in today's weather update. This is going to be the last update on this winter storm since it ended this morning. And so we will go back to our regularly scheduled programming next week with our weekly update, our GWP news weekly that we do, and that's going to be tomorrow, sometime in the afternoon or evening. And then, of course, we have new episodes on Tuesday of the podcast. Of course, Wednesday, you can find a new What in the World episode. And then we'll also have that weekly recap this coming Friday as well. But that's going to be our regular schedule going into next week. So we're going to be ending these weather updates because the extreme weather will be at least exiting as we go into tomorrow. So, but we're still looking at it tonight here as we've got extreme cold warnings across the darker blue. That includes us in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, even the southern half of Missouri here is under those extremely cold warnings. And then we've got those into Minnesota as well as Illinois. And then you can see it going all the way into Alabama and Florida as well. And so that is something of concern. We also have the cold weather advisories in effect across this very light blue color. You may not even be able to see it, but that goes across Kansas into Missouri as well. So you can see it a little bit better when we zoom in on it, that cold weather advisory that is in effect here across Nebraska, Colorado, into Colorado and Wyoming right there. And so again, several states under that risk for very dangerously cold temperatures. And that means that frostbite and hypothermia will be possible within about 30 minutes across the state of Missouri with some of those dangerously cold wind chills that we will be looking at. Further to our east, we're still dealing with the ongoing impacts of the snow and the ice from this storm system. Of course, we've got those ice storm warnings remaining in effect across Georgia and the Carolinas with additional ice accumulation expected there. We've got winter weather advisories right here, this narrow band of purple across Georgia to North Carolina, and then also some winter weather advisories in northern Maine as well as northern Indiana and southern Michigan. That's where we could have some impacts to travel, but not significant travel impacts. Across this pink area, that's the winter storm warnings continuing for us across the mid-Atlantic and northeast states. And that is where we do have significant impacts to travel. That's where the ice and the snow and the sleet are a little bit heavier. That's where we're going to be seeing some of the heavier accumulations. And then, of course, the ice, as we mentioned, in that purple area as well. A lot of these areas are also under cold weather advisories and extreme cold warnings as well. And so that's something to keep in mind. So certainly several states, including us here in Missouri, that are either still dealing with the winter weather or we're dealing with the extreme cold that is ongoing across really a good two-thirds of the country has been impacted in a severe way by this winter storm. Again, even Florida getting involved in some of that colder temperatures. We even had a squall line that moved through earlier today across Florida and Georgia and Alabama with the potential for some of that severe weather that we had earlier today. As we mentioned, the weather story, as you can see from the National Weather Service from Kansas City and Pleasant Hill, showing northern Missouri and eastern Kansas, looking at those dangerously cold wind chills, likely going to be anywhere from 15 to 25 degrees below zero. Of course, that's the actual, or that's the wind chill, not the actual temperature. Actual temperatures will be about 5 to 10 degrees below zero. Cold weather advisories, again, are in effect for this entire area from the National Weather Service there in Kansas City in Pleasant Hill, Missouri. And so things will be getting a little bit better after tomorrow morning. We will start to see that warm up, but the cold is definitely going to linger into next week. Of course, as we mentioned, low temperatures also getting below zero across the southern half of the region. This is the weather story from the Springfield office, Springfield, Missouri office, and you'll notice that wind chills getting anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees below zero as well. A few quick reminders from the National Weather Service that cover all exposed skin, bring pets indoors outdoors, keep flammables away from those space heaters by about 3 feet, and then stay indoors if all possible. Again, do not forget those pets outside. So it can be deadly if they stay outside, especially for tonight. And then again, staying very chilly the next several days as well, but not necessarily as dangerously cold as it's going to be tonight. So we also mentioned the concern with power outages. Luckily, that's something that we haven't had to deal with across the state of Missouri, but we now have several states that are experiencing severe power outages. We've got Tennessee, nearly 3,000 customers, mainly in that western central portion of the state. Mississippi and Louisiana also at over 100,000 customers without power. So these red states, that's 100,000 plus. So we've got 3 states in that. Then we've got 3 states in the yellow. That's 50,000 to 100,000 customers without power, not people. This is households or buildings or businesses that are without power. And so we've got Texas, Kentucky, and Georgia in that 50,000 to 100,000 range, with Texas at the number 4 spot at 71,000 outages. But the good news is that we have less than 0.5% without power in the state of Texas. So that's really good considering previous issues that we've had with the power grid during winter storms there in Texas. So certainly holding up pretty well, I would say, all things considered. Of course, we've got Kentucky, as I mentioned, in that 50,000 to 100,000 range, 53,000. Georgia also with about 51,000 customers without power. Of course, you can get these updates by going to poweroutage.com. That is where these graphics, we're getting those from. South Carolina, also in that list. So that's anywhere from 10 to 50,000. These states in the light blue, that includes West Virginia, Virginia, both Carolinas, and Alabama as well. And so again, several states experiencing the power outages after some of that ice that has moved through, with nearly 900,000 customers currently without power. But luckily, no widespread power outages here across the state of Missouri. So that's good news. Traveling out there, if you're going to be traveling tonight or into tomorrow, keep in mind MoDot. You can find this at traveler.modot.org/map/. That's where you can find this. That's where we're getting this information from. A few of those roads are closed as indicated by the red. We've got a road closed here. We've got more closures over here, it looks like, as well as some over here. We did have some roads closed around Columbia. It looks, well, yeah, we do still have those roads that are closed. Just to the west of Columbia, this is Highway UU and this is Highway O. So W and O currently closed in Boone County. So Interstate 70 is looking a little bit better. We're in the mostly clear range across this western section. And then we've got a few areas that are in that partly covered to mostly clear range. And then we're still fully covered across the St. Louis metro area. That's where we had some of the heavier snow. Springfield also in that partly covered to covered range. And then across Interstate 49, as well as Highway 43, US 160, some of the highways around our local area. That's where we're partly covered at this point in time. So the big snow has been plowed off of all of the major interstates and highways, but there's still some icy patches that are going to be out there. Maybe even a sheet of ice still underneath there. And so it's going to take a little bit of time for that to be treated on the roadways. Only so much can be done within the first 24 hours, but overall, pretty fast response time, all things considered with that. So we mentioned that the Northeast is still getting impacts. Here's all that precipitation. We could be seeing over 18 inches of snow across New England. So that's something that we're going to have to work with. And then again, we even have had a squall line that's been moving through across Alabama in Florida as well. So ongoing impacts out of this winter storm here can be felt there. That, of course, what we were just looking at was the National Weather Service's NOAA radar. So that's what we showed you. Then we're going to be looking at Tropical Tidbits' GFS model here. You can find this at tropicaltidbits.com. And so you'll notice that this storm system, we've had some warmer air mixing in. That's caused some of the snow to transition over to sleet as well as ice. DC's had quite a bit of sleet and freezing rain today. New York City, similar story. Boston has stayed in the snow the entire time. And so, again, this area in Massachusetts, eastern Massachusetts, certainly could be looking at some very heavy snowfall totals across this area. And this is going to continue through tonight, even into tomorrow morning. We're expecting to have lingering snow showers. This is at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, still ongoing light snow across the Northeast. And then finally, by Tuesday, this will start to move out with a little bit of lingering lake effect snow. Expect it. But again, all of the snow is cleared out of here for now. So back here in the Midwest, the good news is that all of that is gone. But again, the most dangerously cold temperatures that we've seen thus far this season are going to be moving in, with temperatures dropping back below zero, with wind chills in the double digits below zero. Again, we'll get a brief warm up on Tuesday. We could even get above freezing, but by the time we get into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, even just the rest of this week, we are going to be staying below freezing, which is part of the reason why none of the snow is going to melt. So certainly stay warm out there. Just be aware that we've still got several more days of colder air. We're not expecting to get above freezing for a while. And so that, of course, it's going to take a while for this snowpack to melt down. And so that's why you have to let the road crews and the workers get out there and make it to where it's safe, because otherwise it's just not safe to be out there on those snow-packed roadways. Of course, if the main stuff has been scraped, it's a little bit safer. There's still a lot of ice on the roadways, but it's a little bit less dangerous. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. The last thing we're going to look at is, where does this put us so far for the season? So just first of all, those snowfall totals, we had 6.5 inches reported in Nevada, and then here in Columbia, we had roughly about 5.2 inches. There is a possibility, these are preliminary numbers, and so the snowfall reports could be updated a little bit as we go over the next couple of days. So these are not the official storm totals. This is just kind of a preliminary number, kind of what we're looking at this point in time. But we'll see what comes out of that here in a few days. We should have the official numbers. As far as the snowfall this season, that puts us at 7 inches in Nevada, which is just slightly below our average for the entire season. But we still have, over a month of winter left to go. Not to mention we can get snow in March and April sometimes. And then Columbia is now at 8.8 inches with 5.2 from this storm system. So we're still quite a bit below average on when it comes to the season. And as far as the forecast, there's for this winter, we're still quite a bit below that as well. What's in the forecast? Nothing at this point in time. So that's good. We need some time to clear out of here, but it is possible we could get some light snow later this week, but we'll keep you updated on that. And then here are the snowfall totals that we had across Missouri. St. Genevieve, excuse my lack of capitalization there of a town name, St. Genevieve at 13.6 inches. That was the highest snowfall report that we had in the state of Missouri from the storm system. Anderson and McDonald County picked up 10 inches, Springfield 9.6, Neosho 7.5, Carthage 7. Webb City was around that 7 range as well. Joplin was about 6.5 to 7 as well. Nevada at about 6.5 inches. Jefferson City picked up about 6. As I mentioned, here in the Columbia area was about 5 to 5.5 roughly. Again, we still have to get some of those totals. And then Lamar at 5 inches, and then Lake of the Ozarks just slightly below that. So those were some of our snowfall totals. Again, as you'll notice, a lot of these came from the National Weather Service snowfall reports. That's where we got a lot of this information from. All right, well, that is it for tonight.